Jacqueline with Coffee with Granny. I'm so glad you joined me today. You know, usually I talk about the good old days, the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But I want to tell you something that happened just last year, last winter. Uh, do you believe or have you ever heard of angels unaware? I believe there are angels on this earth to maybe test us. Let me tell you a story. My little house faces the west, but there's two bedrooms there, and the living room and the kitchen are to the east. And so the street in front of us, I never see anybody going down the street. I don't know what's going on outside, honestly, because I'm not in those two rooms very much during the day, even though one of them is my sewing room. I teach beginner sewing and quilting, and I have a lot of sewing stuff in there. Well, that's why I went in there that day. I don't sew much in there. I sew right back there where that machine is. But I went back in there and was doing something, and it was cold. It was 9 degrees outside, probably about, I don't remember the time of day. It seemed like it was in the afternoon, right after lunch, but I could be wrong about that. I don't remember if it was morning or afternoon. And I just happened to look out the window, and we had about 3 or 4 inches of snow and just bitter cold. We were in our third day of just in the teens and zeros. Well, I looked and I thought, I can't be seeing what I'm seeing, but there was a man hobbling down the street on crutches. He had a little short, summery type jacket, short, like a leather jacket, but not a leather jacket, but I mean the length of it, just to your waist. And his foot, he had a boot on. And he was hobbling in that snow, struggling. And I thought, you're going to freeze to death. You are not dressed for 9 degrees. You're going to freeze. And I just instantly went out that door and hollered at him. And I said, sir, and it took me a while. I think the wind was blowing something, and he didn't hear me right off. I said, wait right there. I'm going to go get the car, and I'm going to come around and get you. And he looked just stunned, and he said, okay. And I go back in the house and go to the garage and get the car and drive around the block and go pick him up. So we're going to be going this way, and he was walking this way. And I said, where are we headed? And he said, well, I was going to the gas station down here at the intersection. That's a mile away. He would have never made it. He would have never made it. And I said, well, I'll be glad to take you. And he said, well, okay, I sure do. I sure appreciate it. And I introduced myself, and I asked him, I said, what is your name? And I'm thinking he told me it was Jeremy, but I might be all wet. I don't know. But anyway, I would say he was a young man of about 27, 28, 29, the very age of my grandsons. And I said, well, I'll be glad to take you to the gas station, and I'll bring you back home. Where do you live? And he said, well, just a block down from your house. And our blocks are long. I mean, they're more than just a short little street. And so he had already walked a long ways. And I told him, I said, I'll take you to the gas station and take you back home. And he said, okay. Well, we didn't, have too much to say. What do you say to total strangers? But he went in and got whatever, and he didn't come out with a sack. He didn't come out with anything. And it didn't take me long to surmise that he probably needed a pack of cigarettes. My husband's a smoker. I know the addiction. My two boys were snuff. And so I know when the urgency strikes, you're gonna try to do foolish things and walk 1.5 miles to go get it. I have no judgment of that because I know I lived with men that had those addictions. So on the way back, it was like we turned the corner to go back to our street. And he lived about 3 houses down on the next block. And he said, well, ma'am, I don't know why you did this, but I sure do thank you. And I looked at him and I said, well, I guess because the Lord told me to. And he smiled so big. And he said, well, that's just what my grandma would say. And he got out and went to his house, and I'll never see the young man again. But it just left such an impression upon me that I don't know, and I don't say this to give me credit. I don't mean it that way, but there's not many folks that would have stopped and picked the man up. And I don't think he would have made it. Well, I thought about him for days, I just hope the Lord blessed my small act of kindness and touched his heart in some way so that he knows how much God loves him. And I'll never know till I get to heaven. And then maybe the Lord will tell me all about him and how he's doing. So I just wanted to tell you that story. I truly do believe in angels unaware, and sometimes I think it's to test us and to see if we're listening to him, to see if we hear. And if we do what he tells us. I was telling my son about it the next day, and he had, he kind of chastised me and said, Mom, do you realize how dangerous that was? And I said, yes, I'm fully aware, but I also know the Lord told me to do it and I would be okay. And I knew that. I knew I would be okay. So next time something unusual happens or a strange circumstance comes your way, think about it this way. Maybe it's an angel unaware. Okay. Until we meet again, you remember God loves you.